The drive from Boston to my parents' house in Hartford takes about an hour and 40 minutes if traffic cooperates. That Saturday in late June, it took me almost 3. I remember because I kept checking the clock on my dashboard, watching the minutes tick by while my chest got tighter and tighter. Mom's 70th birthday party. I'd already missed her 65th because of a deposition that ran long, and I swore I wouldn't miss this one. Even if I had to drive there on fumes and pride, I'd been awake since 4 that morning, finishing a brief for a wrongful termination case that was going to trial in 2 weeks. My back was killing me. I'm a litigation paralegal at a mid-sized firm in the Back Bay, and the past 18 months had been the worst stretch of my career. We'd taken on 3 class actions back to back, and I was the one digging through discovery, building chronologies, running point on document review. The kind of work that eats you alive and pays just enough to keep you doing it. But that's not why my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. They were shaking because I'd just gotten off the phone with my mother, and she'd said something that didn't sit right. "Your brother is bringing the cake," she'd told me. Such a sweet boy. He insisted on covering the whole party. The whole party. I pulled into a rest stop outside Sturbridge and sat there in the parking lot for a good 10 minutes. I was 32 years old. I was supposed to be a grown woman with healthy boundaries and an ironclad sense of self. But hearing my mother gush about my brother covering the party I'd been quietly funding for years through the joint account I shared with her, felt like getting kicked in the sternum. Let me back up. 4 years ago, my dad had a stroke, a bad one. He came home from the hospital with a left side that didn't quite work and a vocabulary that had shrunk to maybe 200 words. Mom couldn't keep nursing him full-time and hold down her bookkeeping job, so she went part-time. Their savings, which had never been impressive, started bleeding out fast. Medicare didn't cover half of what they needed. The physical therapy alone was $800 a month out of pocket. I sat with Mom at her kitchen table the week Dad came home, and we built a budget on the back of a Stop and Shop receipt. The shortfall was $1,800 a month. I told her I'd cover it. Every first of the month, $2,100 from my checking account into the joint account we set up at Bank of America. The extra $300 was a buffer for emergencies. PT copays, prescription refills, the time the basement water heater died in February. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't rich. I'm still not. My salary was $78,000 a year before taxes, and Boston is not a city where $78,000 goes far. I lived in a 1-bedroom in Allston with a roommate I found on Craigslist, a 36-year-old guy who worked from home and reheated fish in the microwave at least twice a week. I drove a 2012 Hyundai Elantra that I'd bought used in law school and never replaced. My closet was Old Navy and the occasional Banana Republic clearance rack. I hadn't been on a vacation since 2019, and that one had been 4 days in Montreal where I'd stayed at a hostel. $2,100 a month is a lot of money when you make what I make. For 4 years, that was my reality. And nobody talked about it. Mom and I had an understanding. The money came in, the bills got paid, Dad got his therapy. End of story. Or so I thought. I got back on the highway and turned the music up too loud, trying to drown out the noise in my head. My brother, the sweet boy, the one who was insisting on covering the whole party. My brother is 2 years older than me. His name is Garrett, and he has spent his entire adult life failing upward in a way that defies physics. He dropped out of UConn his junior year because he wanted to build something. That something turned out to be a series of LLCs that all sounded like cologne brands. He sold supplements for a while. Then he was in real estate, but I never saw him close a deal. For the past 3 years, he's been calling himself a founder, which, as far as I can tell, means he hosts a podcast that has fewer than 400 downloads per episode and posts on LinkedIn about manifesting abundance. He lives in a townhouse in West Hartford with his girlfriend, a woman named Sage who teaches hot yoga and sells essential oils through some multi-level marketing thing. Sage drives a leased BMW. Garrett drives a Tesla, also leased. They post pictures of themselves on Instagram at rooftop bars in Miami and ski lodges in Vermont. The captions say things like blessed and leveling up, and the universe is providing. I'd asked Mom once, maybe 2 years ago, how Garrett was actually paying for any of it. She'd given me this strange, evasive smile and said, "He's doing well, honey. Don't worry about him." I didn't worry about him. I worried about Mom and Dad, and I kept sending the money. I pulled into the driveway at 3:40 in the afternoon. The party was supposed to start at 4. The house looked nicer than it had in years. New paint on the shutters. The front walk had been repointed. There was a fresh wreath on the door, made of those dried flowers Mom liked. Somebody had clearly been spending money on the place, and I felt a small, warm flush of pride because I knew that money had come from me. The buffer, the extra 300. It had added up. I grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat and walked up to the door, and that's when I saw the car parked behind Dad's old Buick. A black Range Rover, brand new. The dealer sticker was still in the back window. I stood there for a second, just looking at it. Then the door opened, and my mother was there, and she pulled me into a hug that smelled like the same Estee Lauder perfume she'd worn for as long as I could remember. "You made it." "Oh, sweetheart, you look exhausted. Traffic was bad. Come in, come in. Everyone's almost here. Your brother's been here since noon helping me set up." I followed her into the kitchen, and there he was. My brother. Garrett. Wearing a navy blazer that fit him a little too tight across the shoulders, holding a glass of red wine, laughing at something Sage was saying. He turned when he heard me come in, and his face did this thing. It always does, where he smiles like we're co-conspirators in some private joke I was never let in on. "There she is. The career woman. We were starting to think you weren't coming. I'm here. You're sweating. Are you sick?" "It's June, Garrett. I drove for 3 hours. Sage stepped forward and air kissed me on both cheeks. She smelled like patchouli and something else, something synthetic and chemical underneath. "It's so good to see you. Your mom has been talking about you all week." The doorbell rang. More relatives. Mom went to answer it, and I stood there in the kitchen with my brother and his girlfriend, and I noticed that he was wearing a watch I didn't recognize. Something heavy, gold-toned, probably an Omega or something pretending to be one. "Nice watch," I said. "Birthday gift. From Sage." He held it up, turned his wrist. "She spoils me." "You spoil yourself," Sage said, giggling. It was a joint decision. I excused myself to put my bag in the spare room. I needed a minute. I sat on the edge of the bed that used to be mine when I was in high school, and I tried to do the math in my head. Garrett had never had a real job. Sage's yoga studio was, last I checked, a converted garage with 11 students on the busiest night. The Range Rover. The Tesla. The watch. The trips. The townhouse, which I happened to know had a mortgage around $2,800 a month because Mom had mentioned it once. Something wasn't adding up. I'd been telling myself for years that it wasn't my problem, that Garrett was a grown man and his finances were his own. But sitting on that bed, with my back aching and my eyes burning and my brother downstairs in a blazer that cost more than my entire wardrobe, I felt something cold start to crawl up my spine. The party filled up by 4:30. Aunts, uncles, 2 of Mom's church friends, my dad's old coworkers from the insurance company where he'd worked for 31 years. Dad was set up in his recliner in the living room, and people were taking turns sitting next to him and talking too loud the way people do with stroke survivors. He smiled at me when I came in and squeezed my hand. He couldn't say much, but his eyes were the same eyes they'd always been, sharp. Knowing. Garrett had hired a caterer. I noticed that immediately. There was a guy in a black shirt and apron in the kitchen, plating little crab cakes and pinwheel sandwiches. Bottles of nice wine on the counter, a 2-tier cake on the dining room table with white frosting and edible gold leaf around the base. Edible gold leaf for a 70th birthday party at our ranch house in Hartford. "Where did you get the cake?" I asked Mom casually as I helped her carry a tray of glasses to the dining room. "Oh, that fancy place downtown," Garrett insisted. He said Mom only turned 70 once. That must have been expensive. He didn't tell me how much. He just kept saying not to worry about it. She squeezed my arm. "He's been so good to us, honey." I smiled at her. I smiled so hard my face hurt. We ate around 6. People filled their plates, found seats in the living room and the dining room and out on the back patio. Dad ate slowly, with the spoon Mom had bought that had the rubberized grip. I sat on the floor near his recliner and asked him about the Red Sox, and he made a face that meant he didn't want to talk about how they were doing. After dinner, Garrett tapped his glass with a fork. The room quieted down. He stood up in his too-tight blazer and put his free hand over his heart. I just want to say a few words about Mom. People made the warm noises people make. Mom blushed and waved him off, but I could see she was loving it. Mom, you raised us to be good people, to work hard, to take care of family. And the past 4 years since Dad's stroke have not been easy for any of us, but especially for you. A few unstabbed their eyes. I want everyone here to know something. Because Mom would never say it herself, the past 4 years, she has been a rock. And I have done everything in my power to be a son she could be proud of. Sage and I have made sure that you and Dad have had what you needed. The house, the medical bills. We've been blessed enough in our work that we could give back. I went very, very still. And when this party came up, when I knew Mom was turning 70, I didn't even hesitate. I told Sage this one's on us, whatever it takes, because the woman who raised me deserves the world. He raised his glass. To Mom, the strongest woman I know. Everyone raised their glasses. Sage put her hand on her chest and looked like she might cry. Mom was definitely crying, the good kind, dabbing under her eyes with a napkin so her mascara wouldn't run. My Aunt Christine, who was sitting next to me on the couch, leaned over and whispered, "Your brother is just the sweetest. You're so lucky to have a sibling like that." I smiled at her. I think I smiled at her. I don't actually remember what my face did, because something had just shifted in my head. Not loudly, quietly, the way a key turns in a lock. The past 4 years. He'd said the past 4 years. He said he'd been covering the house, the medical bills. I'd been covering the house and the medical bills. I had 4 years of bank statements that said so. $2,100 a month, every month, like a heartbeat. I had the auto pay confirmations, I had the joint account. I had every memo line that said Mom and Dad household. I sat there on my parents' couch, surrounded by people raising their glasses to my brother, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. I thought for a wild second that maybe Mom had told Garrett about my contributions and he was taking credit out in the open as some kind of insane power move. Then I thought, no, this is something else. This is something different. And the part of my brain that had spent 18 months building chronologies and reading Discovery and finding the one document in a box of 10,000 that broke the case open, that part of my brain woke up. I excused myself and went upstairs to the bathroom. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and I opened the Bank of America app on my phone. I scrolled to the joint account. I went back 6 months, then 12, then 24. I looked at the deposits. There they were, like clockwork. Every first of the month. From my name, $2,100. The memo line every single time was Mom and Dad household. I scrolled to the withdrawals. The mortgage was supposed to be paid out of this account. $1,640 on the 5th of every month, electronic transfer to the lender. I scrolled, looking for that line. April. There. $1,640. March. $1,640. February. I scrolled, and I didn't see it. I went back up. I went back down. February didn't have a mortgage payment. There was a withdrawal on the 5th for $200. Then on the 8th, $400 to Zelle, recipient G. Whitman. My brother. I felt the room get very small. I went back to January. The mortgage was there, $1,640. But there were 3 Zelle transfers that month, totaling $1,100, all to G. Whitman. I went back further. November. The mortgage hadn't been paid. There were Zelle transfers to G. Whitman totaling $1,500. I sat on the edge of that tub for I don't know how long. My hands had stopped shaking. That happens to me sometimes when something terrible is happening. The shaking stops and a kind of cold calm takes over, and I can see things very clearly. I opened a new tab and logged into the mortgage portal. I had set up the credentials 4 years ago when we'd consolidated everything. The login worked on the first try. The screen loaded. Poundman status. Delinquent days past due. 6 to 7 amount to reinstate. $4,920 and $920. Notice of both. Recorded May 18. I read it 3 times. Then I went back to the joint account and I exported the last 24 months of transactions to a PDF. I emailed the PDF to myself. I screenshotted the mortgage portal. I emailed those screenshots to myself too. I sat in that bathroom for maybe 15 minutes total, and when I came out, I had built a case file in my head the same way I'd build one for a deposition. Downstairs, someone was cutting the cake. People were laughing. Sage was taking pictures with her phone, holding it up at angles that flattered her jawline. I came down the stairs slowly. My mother saw me first, and her face did a small, almost imperceptible thing. A flicker. She knew I'd been gone too long. She knew I was a person who paid attention. "Honey, are you okay? You're so pale." "I'm fine, Mom. Just a little tired from the drive. Come have some cake. Your brother spent a fortune on it." Garrett was at the dining room table holding the cake knife. He grinned at me as I walked in. "There she is," the disappearing act. "I'm here. You should give a toast too. Sister to sister, you know. Daughter to mom." A few people murmured agreement, and Christine clapped her hands together once. "Oh yes, sweetheart, say something." I looked at my mother. I looked at my father in his recliner. He was watching me. His eyes were so sharp. "Sure," I said. "I'll say something." Garrett handed me the cake knife, which was a stupid little gesture, but felt symbolic in a way that almost made me laugh. I set it down on the cutting board. I picked up a glass that had a little Prosecco left in it. "Mom," I said, 70 is a big number. You've been a good mother. You've worked hard your whole life. And the past 4 years have been hard for you in a way nobody in this room, except Dad, really understands." She was smiling at me, the kind of smile that was waiting for me to wrap this up so we could eat cake. "I want to ask you something, though, in front of everyone. Because I just got off a call upstairs with the bank, and I'm a little confused." The room got quieter. Not silent, but quieter. "You told everyone that Garrett has been covering the mortgage and the medical bills for the past 4 years, is that right?" My mother's face changed. Just slightly. Just at the edges of her mouth. "Sweetheart, this isn't the time. It's just a question, Mom. Has Garrett been paying the mortgage?" Garrett laughed, this short, barking laugh, and stepped forward. "What's your problem? Why are you doing this right now?" "I'm not doing anything. I'm asking a question." I kept my voice low and even. I'd learned how to do this in deposition prep. The angrier the witness gets, the calmer you stay. "Mom, has Garrett been paying the mortgage?" "He's helped." "He helps. Don't make a scene." "Has he, though?" "Because the mortgage is 67 days past due. There's a notice of default on the property, and I just looked at the joint account that you and I share, and I haven't seen a single deposit from Garrett or Sage in the last 2 years." The room was silent now. Genuinely silent. Even the caterer in the kitchen had stopped moving. Garrett's face had gone a shade of red I'd never seen on a human being before. "You're insane. You're actually insane. You're going to do this at Mom's birthday? You're going to humiliate her?" "I'm not humiliating her. I'm asking her a question." "Mom?" My mother sat down. She just sort of folded into the chair behind her. She put her hand over her mouth. "Aunt Christine," I said, turning to her. She was staring at me, her cake plate forgotten. 2 minutes ago you told me how lucky I was to have a brother like Garrett. I want to ask you something. Has my brother ever told you what he does for work?" He's an entrepreneur. He has the podcast." How many subscribers does the podcast have? She blinked at me. I don't. 382. Average download per episode is under 400. He has no advertising revenue. I checked the podcast hosting platform 6 months ago because I was curious. Garrett, how do you pay the lease on the Range Rover? This is none of your fucking business. Watch your language. Dad's right there. I took a breath. I felt very far away from my own body. I'm going to tell everyone in this room what's actually been happening for the past 4 years, because I think Mom owes some people the truth, and she's not going to be the one to tell it. Don't, my mother whispered. 4 years ago, when Dad had his stroke, I sat down with Mom, and we figured out that she and Dad needed about $1,800 a month to stay afloat. The mortgage, the medical bills, the home modifications, the physical therapy. I told her I'd cover it every month since then. The first of the month, I've transferred $2,100 into a joint account I share with Mom. That's about $25,000 a year, times 4 years. A little over $100,000. People weren't looking at me. They were looking at my brother. Mom has been telling all of you that Garrett pays the bills, that Garrett saved them after the stroke, that Garrett is the good son. I've heard it secondhand for years from cousins, from neighbors, from Christine just now. I always told myself it didn't matter. Mom needed to feel proud of him. Garrett needed his ego stroked, and I had work to do. I turned to my brother. He was just standing there. His hand was still in a fist at his side. What I didn't know until 20 minutes ago is that Mom hasn't just been letting you take credit for my money. She's been giving you my money. There are Zelle transfers from the joint account to your account every single month for at least 2 years. Sometimes hundreds, sometimes over 1,000. And in the months you took the most, she didn't have enough left to pay the mortgage. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I have the statements on my phone right now. I have screenshots from the mortgage portal showing 67 days past due. I have a notice of default that was recorded in May, which is a matter of public record, and which means anyone in this room can go to the county website tonight and verify it. Garrett. It was my father's voice. Slurred but unmistakable. He was sitting up in his recliner, his good hand gripping the armrest. Garrett. My brother flinched like he'd been flapped. How much? My father said. Garrett looked at Mom. Mom was crying without making any noise. Dad, there's been a lot of their timing issues of the podcast revenue. The contracts take a while to. How much? I don't know exactly. I do, I said. From the joint account alone, over the last 24 months, Mom has transferred about $28,000 to you via Zelle. That's just what I can see in 2 years. I haven't pulled the earlier statements yet. There could be more. Sage made a small noise. She was looking at Garrett like she was seeing him for the first time. Mom, I said. My voice cracked a little. The first crack since I'd walked down the stairs. Why? She wouldn't look at me. She was crying into her hands. He needed help. He was struggling. The townhouse. He's been leasing a $60,000 SUV with my money. He took Sage to Aruba in March. I saw the Instagram posts. It wasn't all at once. It was little bits. He'd ask for help and I'd send what I could. What you could. It wasn't yours, Mom. It was mine. It was for Dad's therapy. It was for the house. I know. The house is 67 days from foreclosure. She finally looked up at me. Her face was wrecked. He said he was going to pay it back. He was going to pay it all back as soon as the deal closed. What deal? She looked at Garrett. Garrett was staring at the floor. There's no deal, is there? I wasn't asking. There's never been a deal. There's no podcast money. There's no business. You've been living off Mom and Dad's mortgage for 2 years and telling everyone you're a self-made man. Sage took a step back from Garrett. Then another step. Then she said, very quietly, I think I'm going to leave. Garrett didn't even look at her. The room had emptied out, almost. Some of the ants had drifted toward the front door. Aunt Christine was still sitting on the couch, but she had her purse in her lap and her coat half on. The caterer was pretending very hard not to listen. "Dad," I said. I knelt down by his recliner. "Dad, the house is gonna be okay. I'm gonna fix this, but I need you to be okay first. Can you breathe with me?" He squeezed my hand. He nodded. "Garrett." I stood up. "Sit down. We're going to have a conversation. I don't have to listen to you. You can listen to me, or you can listen to a forensic accountant from my firm, who I will pay out of pocket to subpoena every account you've touched. Your call." He sat down. I made everyone else leave. Politely. I thanked the aunts for coming. I told the caterer he could pack up. I gave him an extra $100 in cash from my wallet, because none of this was his fault, and the man had made very nice crab cakes. By 8 o'clock, it was just me, Mom, Dad, and Garrett at the dining room table. The cake was still sitting there, untouched, with one slice taken out. I made coffee. I sat down with my laptop and I pulled up the joint account statements. I printed them on Mom's old inkjet upstairs. I printed the mortgage portal screenshots. I laid them all out on the table like an exhibit. "Mom, you are going to give me power of attorney over the joint account. Tomorrow morning, we are going to the bank, and we are going to add me as a co-signer on the mortgage. Then I am going to pay the arrears out of my own savings, and I am going to refinance the loan in my name, because if I don't, the house is gone in 90 days. She nodded. She couldn't speak. "Dad's care will continue. I will be the one paying for it directly, from now on. No more deposits to a shared account. I will pay the lender. I will pay the PT clinic. I will pay the home health aide when we get one, which we are getting, because you can't keep doing this alone." "Okay," she whispered. "Garrett." I looked at my brother. "You owe this household $28,000 that I know about. I'm going to assume there's more in the earlier statements. We'll find out. You are going to sign a promissory note tonight. You are going to pay it back at a minimum of $600 a month for the next 46 months. If you miss a single payment, I am going to small claims court and then to civil court for fraud. You can't. I am a paralegal at a litigation firm. Do not test me on what I can do." He went pale. "You are going to call the Range Rover dealer on Monday and return the vehicle. You are going to do the same with the Tesla. You are going to stop posting on Instagram about being blessed. And if I ever again hear from anyone in this family that you are helping out Mom and Dad, I am sending the bank statements to every single person on the Christmas card list. Do you understand me?" He nodded. "Say it." "I understand." Mom started crying again. I let her cry. Dad squeezed my hand once more, hard, and I knew what he was saying. He was saying thank you. The rest of that night, after Garrett left, was quiet. I helped Mom clean up. We didn't talk much. I think she was waiting for me to forgive her, and I wasn't ready yet. She put leftovers in Tupperware. I rinsed wine glasses. Around 11, I helped her get Dad into bed the way I'd watched her do it 100 times. I slept in my childhood bedroom and stared at the water stain on the ceiling that had been there since I was 12. The next morning, we went to the bank when it opened. The whole thing took 2 hours. The teller was very kind. I paid the $4,920 in arrears from my emergency fund. My emergency fund was supposed to be 6 months of expenses. I was down to about 3 weeks now. I would rebuild it. I knew how. I drove back to Boston that Sunday afternoon. I called my best friend, Hannah, from the highway. She picked up on the second ring. "How was the party?" "My brother's been stealing from my parents for 2 years, and I exposed him in front of 30 relatives." She was silent for a long second. "Are you serious? Mortgage was 67 days delinquent. He's been zelling himself money out of the joint account. Mom let him." "Jesus Christ. Where are you right now?" 90 East. I'm okay. I'm actually okay. And the strange thing was, I was not happy. Not even relieved. Exactly. but there was this clean feeling in my chest, like something that had been pressing on my ribs for years had finally been pried loose. 6 months later, the house is current on payments. Dad has a part-time home health aide named Brenda, who plays cribbage with him on Tuesdays. Mom and I are in family therapy. We go every other Saturday. The first 3 sessions were brutal. She kept saying she was sorry. The therapist kept gently pointing out that sorry wasn't a plan. Mom is doing the work now. Slowly, she started keeping a notebook where she writes down every dollar that comes in and out of her own account. She shows it to me when I visit. I don't ask her to. She just does. Garrett returned the Range Rover. He didn't return the Tesla in time and got slapped with an early termination fee that he paid out of money. I'm pretty sure he borrowed from his old college roommate. He's living in a studio apartment in East Hartford now. Sage left him within 2 weeks of the party. I heard through cousins that she's dating someone who actually owns the yoga studio she teaches at. Garrett has paid me back 4 months in a row, $2,400 so far. He sends the payments by Zelle on the 1st of the month, and the memo line says rep-a-month. He doesn't write anything else. We don't talk. I don't know if we ever will. I don't know if I want to. I went to my mother's house for Thanksgiving last week. Just me, Mom, and Dad. We had a small turkey breast and roasted vegetables. Mom made the green bean casserole the way Dad likes it. Dad held my hand across the table during grace and squeezed 3 times, which is the thing he does now that means I love you. After dinner, while Mom was washing dishes, I sat on the couch next to Dad's recliner and showed him pictures of the kitchen renovation I'm planning for next year. Nothing fancy. New countertops, new cabinets. Something I'd been putting off for 4 years. He pointed at the cabinet samples and tapped one. White shaker. I told him that was the one I'd been leaning toward too. Mom came in from the kitchen with 3 cups of decaf. She set one on the side table for Dad and one in front of me and held her own in both hands. "Sweetheart," she said. "Yeah, Mom." "Thank you." I looked at her. She was older than she'd been in June. Something had aged in her face, but she was looking at me directly, the way she hadn't looked at me in years. "You don't have to keep saying it." "I know I don't, but I want to. Thank you for telling the truth, even when it cost you." I didn't say anything for a minute. I just sipped my coffee. "It didn't cost me, Mom," I said finally. "It saved me." She nodded. She understood. Outside, snow was starting to come down. The first snow of the year. Dad watched it fall through the front window, and I watched it with him. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. I think about that night a lot. The drive home to Boston. The clean feeling in my chest. And I keep coming back to one thing. The quiet years before the party. The years I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as Mom and Dad were taken care of. I used to wear that silence like a virtue. I thought I was being the bigger person. I was wrong. Silence didn't protect my parents. It funded Garrett's Range Rover. Every time I let a half-truth slide because I didn't want to embarrass Mom in front of a cousin. Every time I shrugged off Aunt Christine, telling me how lucky I was to have such a generous brother, I was helping build the lie. My patience didn't keep peace. It paid for someone else's lease. That's the part that took me the longest to swallow. The damage wasn't only Garrett's doing. It was mine too. In a smaller, slower way. The way you can flood a basement 1 dripping pipe at a time and call it nothing because no single drop seemed worth the wrench. What I learned, sitting on the edge of that bathtub with my phone in my hand, is that being decent without being clear-eyed is just enabling with better posture. You can love people fiercely and still owe them the truth. In fact, the more you love them, the more you owe them the truth. A daughter who keeps quiet while her mother quietly hands a family stability to the wrong child isn't being kind. She's being convenient. I also learned something about strength that I didn't expect. I had always thought strength looked like working harder, sending more, absorbing more, never complaining. Turns out that wasn't strength. That was endurance dressed up as virtue, Real strength is the willingness to set the cake knife down at your mother's 70th birthday and ask the question that ruins the evening but saves the house. It's the steadiness to keep your voice low when everyone wants you to be hysterical, because hysterical is easier to dismiss. It's pulling out the receipts you've been keeping for 4 years, not because you suspected anything, but because that's just who you are, a person who keeps records. The mind matters. The bank app saved my parents, not my outrage. If I'd walked into that dining room with only my feelings, Garrett would have spun it into a tantrum and I would have driven back to Boston feeling crazy. The evidence is what made the room go quiet. There's a lesson in that for anyone who has ever been gaslit by family. Keep your paperwork, keep your screenshots, keep your memo lines clean and your records boring. Boring records win. But more than anything, I learned that you cannot outsource your own worth to a parent's approval. For 32 years, I waited for someone to notice. The night I stopped waiting was the night the house got saved. That's not coincidence. That's just how it works. You stop asking to be seen, and you start seeing yourself. And somehow the people who matter catch up. The ones who don't, leave. Both are fine.